Go ahead.
Hello, everyone.
Try again.
Hello, everyone. Today we will be presenting donuts. We have myself and Taylor Carter, responsible for food engineering. We have Jamaica Cash, responsible for food chemistry, and we also have Brianna Harris, responsible for food micro. First, we'll give a general definition of what food engineering and food processing is. Food engineering is a multidisciplinary field of applied physical sciences, which combines science, microbiology, and engineering education for food and related industries. And processing is the transformation of raw ingredients by physical or chemical means into food or food into other forms. So here's the basic outline for the food engineering portion. I will first be discussing the yeast-raised donuts. We were suggested to use yeast-raised versus cake and frozen donuts. I'll be giving a clear definition of what the product offers versus rival donuts, which would be the cake donut. And we'll also discuss some processing. Also, I'll go into instruments utilized for mass production, the FCRT120, 1200, PCS per hour and gas donut machine, and the Bell-Shaw Century donut system. Okay, so naturally you can see the difference between the yeast and the cake without even going to chemically, or you can tell by the appearance naturally that they differ. But yeast is made from sweet dough fermented with yeast to obtain this leavening action or expansion. So basically it's just fluffy and airy and soft to the taste. To the texture. Cake is made with sweetened dough that is leavened with baking powder and generally clean, dense, and cake-like. So it's crumbly and buttery, and it's easier to obtain, like for dunking. It holds materials more easily. So we'll speak about the differences in weight. Naturally, the cake donut would weigh more because it rises due to the baking powder, whereas the yeast rises from it rises from natural, from gas, the yeast giving off the natural gas. We have the grams of 71 grams of the cake donut and 49 grams of the yeast. They're generally the same size, just different mechanisms to make it. We also have the differences in texture. The cake donut would be more dense. The yeast donut would be more fluffy or open in texture. The method and length of cooking, naturally it would take the yeast donuts longer to cook because the yeast has to ferment, and fermentation takes time. We have the shape possibilities where they are endless for both baked and cake donuts. You'll see that later on in the slide. And we have the shelf life. We gave Krispy Kreme donuts a call. They said their shelf life ran from five days for yeast and 10 days for baked goods. We called Dunkin' Donuts, and they said it was general 18 hours of yeast or donuts. So yes, not a very long shelf life. We'll discuss that later also. And this is just general pictures of what you can get from donuts. Like the possibilities are basically endless. So this is my outline. Within my outline, so I'll be discussing measuring, mixing, loafing and rounding, intermediate proofing, rolling, sheeting and cutting, reproofing, frying, and finishing. So here's the basic, the ingredients: 3/4 cups of scalded milk, 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, teaspoon of salt. We've got yeast, we got water, milk, all-purpose flour, nutmeg, which is optional, just for the flavor. We have butter or margarine, 2 eggs, and 2 cups of confectionery sugar. And now we have the measuring, which we did prior in the slides. So we'll go to mixing. Mixing, you just put the water into the bowl. First, crumble yeast into water, then add mix. Mix dough until it's pliable and dry to the touch. Dough should pull away from the sides of the bowl when properly developed. The ideal temperature for the dough is around 78 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, because any hotter will ferment too fast. If you have too fast, you have poor texture and produce a darker than normal color when fried. Also, if you pull the dough, whatever, when it's fermented, it'll slow fermentation. Fermentation is just a period of time to allow a chemical change activating the living organism, allowing it time to feed and grow. It basically grows with the leavening gas it produces the leavening gas, which basically naturally makes it grow. It's during the mixing process, and the dough comes up to about 2 to 3 times the normal bulk. Loafing and rounding, basically you're just combining all of it, making it a stable, or like you just basically combining out the organism. You're rounding it in the name. We have next, one second. We have the rolling and sheeting. We basically just blocking the dough into several small pieces. You lose as little dust and flour as possible. Roll dough gently so as not to tear the surface. You cut with an even solid pressure, and you sweep away excess flour. As for the proofing, proof box should be around 95 degrees to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 to 37.8 degrees Celsius, with sufficient humidity to avoid crusting. Then you get to the frying. Proper temperature of the shortening is 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Donuts allow 5 minutes to dry before frying, 55 to 60 seconds on each side. Then you have the finishing product. But after frying, what usually happens is you glaze the donut. With the glazed donut, they use honey as a stabilizer. Basically, the honey, it draws the water out of the donut, which decreases the chance for microbial growth within the donut. But however, it's on the surface of the donut, so it leads into the atmosphere. So now you have a stale donut, which speaks upon the shelf life, basically. Stelling is basically the retrogradation of starches and proteins, which creates a coarse, firm, and dry texture. So the goal would be perhaps to create a substance that could trap the moisture trying to leave, because you can't really stop moisture loss. So what they've done is they've created a moisture impermeable package that will keep the donut soft from 30 to 45 days. It won't stop the moisture loss, but it will slow it down. We're just trying to buy time to keep the product on the shelf longer time to increase profit. Now, we've learned the way to naturally make donuts with your hands, but we have machines that will do it for you, which is awesome. This is the FC RT120 1200 pieces per hour delicious food processing equipment, electric and gas donut machine. The name, one second. The name four-choice reaction time leads to the four choices: the mini electric, the gas power, and the LPG. The one we'll be discussing will be the highlighted gas power. It's just stainless steel, 220 volts, batteries operate, power of 30 watts. It produces 300 to 1,200 pieces per hour, and they can produce a donut anywhere from 3 to 10 centimeters. Just more facts about it: full automatic molding, blanketing, frying, and outputting, automatic molding, automatic temperature control functions, automatic turn donut. And these are basically just saying it does the same thing as we would do naturally, just with machinery. So you cut down on labor, perhaps. You have a machine that can do it for you. We also have the Belshaw Century Donut System. This system, basically it allows you to produce 720 donuts per hour. They have smaller systems for like trial runs where you would just practice with shapings and things of that nature. And they also have larger systems, which is just for mass production. You got trying to get as many donuts as possible. We have the fryers, the proofers, the cake donut depositors, the raised donut extruders, glazing and cooling line, and the batch icer. Just sources for that. Now we will be discussing the food chemistry portion. Food chemistry is generally the study of chemical processes and interactions of all biological and non-biological components of foods. The discipline also encompasses how products change under certain food processing techniques and ways to either enhance or prevent certain changes. It's a brief outline for what we'll be discussing with food chemistry. The Krispy Kreme donut ingredient list, clear reason of what the ingredients offers, the product, the yeast Saccharomyces cerevisiae, baker's yeast in greater detail, and caramelization and Maillard reaction. So here's just a general ingredients list. This doesn't differ much from the list we gave you earlier. So we'll move on. So the reason yeast is used in the product of donuts, it's made of, well, we'll just give a general definition of what yeast is. It's made of tiny single-celled plants which grow by budding. Each bud breaks away from the parent cell, forming a new bud. Brianna will go into this in greater detail. It does have an optimum of 25 to 30 degrees. It feeds on the starch in the mixture, forming the gas which makes the bread rise. Refrigeration does slow down the yeast, as mentioned before. Saccharomyces would be the yeast that we actually speak about. The translation just means it's a sugar fungus. It has the ability to break down food in anaerobic fermentation and aerobic respiration. It has the ability to survive in oxygen deficient environment for a period and can reproduce sexually and asexually. It gets its energy from glucose. Now we have the water. Water plays a big role within donuts. It's needed from the gluten to form the gluten and give the dough consistency. It is also the solvent or medium for substances like sugar and enzymes that are indispensable for fermentation. We go to milk. Milk protein. The protein in milk creates a strong batter or dough capable of rising withstanding the rigors of baking. The sugar and the fat in milk help tenderize and moisten the baked good while adding flavor. Shortening, which is basically a fat that weakens the dough by weakening its gluten network, gives you a softer bread and a tender mouthfeel. We have the flour. It's high in gluten, responsible for texture, supports the ingredients during the rising. The salt, which adds flavor and strengthens the fat, is a natural binder. And we also have the eggs, utilized for airy texture. The egg white albumin contains lecithin, which binds the products together, and is also a source of protein for the Maillard reaction. Now we have the Maillard reaction. In some cases, Maillard reaction isn't desired, but in this case, we do want some browning. It's non-enzymatic brownings caused by heat. It's a chemical reaction between amino acids and reducing sugars that gives brown food its desirable flavor. It involves water. And caramelization is basically colorless sweet substance when they are heated and transformed to compounds varying in color from light yellow to dark brown. And the color we want to get is golden brown.
Okay, this is the food microbiology part, the study of the microorganisms that can create a contaminated foods, and also study of microorganisms that cause food spoilage. As the bread, it involves the Saccharomyces, which is called the baker's yeast under anaerobic conditions. It maximizes the CO2 production, which leavens the bread. The bread is also a source of bacillus species that produces the aromatase. The main ingredients are yeast and their functions. The sugar gives off the sweetness and the browning. The fat gives off the tenderness. The salt gives off the flavor and the controls and the rates of the yeast growth. The liquid, which the moisture comes from. The flour, the main ingredient, and the structure, and the yeast is the leavening agent. The nutritional contributions of yeast is the fats, the thiamines, the irons, the nectar, the calcium, the riboflavin, the vitamin A, the proteins, and the carbohydrates. What is yeast? Yeast is a single-cell fungi and a fungi that is related to the other fungi that we as people are more familiar with. These are the edible mushrooms available in the supermarkets, common baker's yeast used in leavening, breads, mold and ripening, blue cheese, and molds that produce antibiotics for medical and veterinary use. And the three things needed for the yeast to grow is the moisture, warmth, and the sugar. The functions of yeast is in baking. The carbon dioxide is generated by the yeast, and as a result of the breakdown of fermentable sugars in doughs, carbon dioxide causes the expansion of dough as it is trapped inside the protein matrix of the dough. The yeast is a single-cell fungi as a fungi that we're related to other mushrooms, as I just stated in the last PowerPoint. How the water temperature affects the growth of yeast. When the water is cold, it slows down the growth, and when the water is too hot, it kills the yeast and leaves the bread unleavened. The microbial contaminations. Most common bread spoilage molds are penicillin and aspergillus. These two produce biotoxins such as ochratoxins and flavotoxins, which can be very resistant and can survive the heating process. And these are our references.
That's it, guys.